Hey, everybody out in Maryland's beautiful 8th Congressional District. It's your Congressman, Jamie Raskin, coming to you today, Friday, January the 3rd, with Local Hero. It's my favorite time in the week, as you know, when we get to interact with the people who make our district so extraordinary. And do we have a remarkable hero, local hero for you and national hero for this very first episode of Local Hero in 2025? My guest is the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Denis McDonough, formerly the White House Chief of Staff in the Obama administration. Before that, he was the Principal Deputy National Security Advisor, and he was the Chief of Staff, if I'm remembering correctly, to the NSC as well. He's had a really amazing career in public service. He was born in Chicago, grew up there, one of 11 kids, but now he is a dyed in the wool, tried and true blue Maryland 8th District resident. He lives with his wife, Kari, and their three kids in Montgomery County. And for everything you've done for America, Denis, for everything you've done for our veterans, for everything you've done for the security of the country, we want to recognize you as our local hero this first week of January. And congratulations on that very significant achievement.
Well, Congressman, it's such an honor to have it. So thank you for it. I told you just now before we started taping, and I told you when you called me, I'm definitely not qualified for this awesome thing. I love being associated with you as our member of Congress. I love being associated with the 8th District, and I love being associated with VA and the veterans who've done so much to fight for this country. And, my guess is there are hundreds and hundreds of VA employees who also live in the 8th District of Maryland. So I want to say that they are all much more deserving than I am of this award because, we have 451,000 employees here at the VA who are fighting every day for veterans. And that is as it should be. And I'm thrilled to be part of it.
Well, I see that we're reaching you during this holiday season in your office. I see the American flag. I see the VA flag. There's one I'm not recognizing. Which one is that?
I think that's the flag of the secretary. The secretary gets a flag, actually.
The secretaries, you've got your own flag. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, look, you are known for your unflagging devotion to the people of the country and to public service. And you've served in the House, you've served in the Senate, you served in the White House, the NSC. Now you've been secretary of one of our most important departments. You've served in the legislative branch. You've served in the executive branch. You've not served, to my knowledge, in the judicial branch. Maybe we'd be better for it had you done something over the Supreme Court.
I'm trying to stay out of the judicial branch. I mean,
yeah.
So,
but give us, as you look back over your career and as you prepared to leave the administration. What have been your favorite experiences? I mean, has it been on the executive side? It's been in the legislative side. I'm sure that you preferred the House to the Senate, but give us your reflections on it.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll make one kind of general observation, and then I'll make a particular observation. The general observation is kind of the Constitution maybe is as the rest of your professional life in Washington, and I think a lot of your constituents, and surely you and your staff can associate this, which is sometimes where you stand is where you sit. So when I got to work for the House Foreign Affairs Committee, or when I got to work for the Senate Majority Leader, I was very focused on the Article 1 responsibilities in national security matters, the appointment power, the nomination power, the power of the purse. But then when I started work for the president in the White House, I obviously became very partial to Article 2 and all the responsibilities that come with that. And so the beauty of this opportunity I've had is, I've gotten a chance to see a little bit of everything, and that's a great blessing. The biggest blessing, though, of my career is the people whom I get to work with. And, obviously, here in this building, that means working for veterans. And it's true in the 8th district as it is in every corner of the country where there's something interesting happening. Veterans are involved, and that's great that I get to work on behalf of them. But I've gotten a chance to meet a lot of really interesting people along the way. You know, you're one of them, Mr. Raskin, but there's been others too, and the opportunity to work on behalf of the country and with these committed public servants, these patriots. Having started out a long time ago, thinking I was just coming to DC to go to grad school, then I was going to go home. It's been I've been really, really lucky.
So during your tenure as the secretary of the VA, we passed the PACT Act, and you were obviously essential to that process. That was back in 2022, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes.
The veterans, wherever I go, the veterans know about the PACT Act. It's a really big deal. But outside of the veterans community, still people don't really understand it and know it. So why don't you say a few words about the PACT Act and why it was so important, what the impact of it has been in different parts of the country?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for the question. And more importantly, thank you for making the PACT Act law, right? You were one of the principal sponsors of that, moving it through the House, and ended up passing overwhelmingly in a bipartisan fashion, House and Senate. And the president obviously signed it in August 2022 with great pride as the head of a military family himself. But maybe it's best to tell the story of the law through the president's experience, meaning, Major Beau Biden deployed overseas a couple different times, once to Kosovo, another time to Iraq. And when he was in Iraq, he was exposed, as so many of our troopers in Central Command were, to what we call burn pits. These are big pits, and many times they could be hundreds and hundreds of yards long or yards square, where we would burn, where our troopers would burn and destroy, the fuel, the garbage, the human waste in some cases, that was the byproduct of war in Iraq and Afghanistan. It just turns out that our troopers deployed there were also inhaling the smoke from those burn pits. And we now know that that exposure to those toxins that were being burned in those burn pits is associated with a series of conditions that many of our troopers suffer from. And so you all, in your wisdom in passing the PACT Act, said, hey, if you have any of these conditions, and there are now several hundred conditions, it could be asthma, or it could be certain cancers. If you have those conditions and you served in Central Command any time from the first Gulf War until really today, we're going to assume that that condition is a result of your service defending the country, meaning you can then get health care and you can get benefits from VA. So Beau Biden came home. He had a terrible brain cancer. He ended up succumbing to that brain cancer. And in retrospect, we now know that that condition he had is connected to exposure to the burn pits. So there's now more than 1 million, in fact, more than 1.2 million veterans like Major Beau Biden, many of them in your district, who have access to healthcare for the first time, have access to benefits for the first time because of that law. That's good news, 1.2 million, but there are still millions left in the country who could qualify under this act. And so we're going to keep working to spread the word to them to please come see us at VA. Call us at 1-800-MY-VA-411, and we'll get you connected to care. We'll get you connected to benefits, as we already have done with 1.2 million of your fellow veterans.
And so, like with Beau Biden, it was brain cancer. Other people, it's lung cancer, emphysema, leukemia,
asthma, sinusitis, any number of conditions. As I say, there's more than 200 conditions now connected to the PACT Act. Let's say if you have this condition then we're going to and you served overseas, we're going to connect those two things and get you care and benefits. So it's not the veteran's job to know, hey, do I have that condition? We just want them to know, we want their families to know, you now may qualify for this care. You may qualify for these benefits. Come in and see us and let us figure out precisely your connection to that law. And
the legislation, it covers exposure to any kind of toxin, not just the burn pits, but Agent Orange or whatever it might be. And the big change,
it covers even if you didn't serve in Iraq or Afghanistan. Let's say you're drilling here at home and you were in a base where you're exposed to certain lead paints, you're exposed to nuclear weapons, you're exposed to asbestos. You are also now today covered. So
and that is the big change that you fought for, which was in the old days, you could theoretically be covered, but you had to prove that it didn't come from some other source. And now the whole presumption is switched over, which is it's presumed it was because of your military service. If the government wants to deny it to you, the government has to go and show, no, it was because of some job you had working for 40 years in a nuclear power plant or something. Right?
Exactly. This is what your law, this is what President Biden has fought for, which is to say, hey, the burden of proof is not on the veteran. Right?
Yeah.
The burden of proof is on us at VA. So let's presume it's connected. And that's a learning from the experience that the Vietnam vets went through. For years, having to argue to VA and to others that, hey, these conditions that I have, I believe these are connected to my service in Vietnam. And for too long, for decades, we denied that. And what you're doing now with the PACT Act is you're insisting, hey, we learned our lesson with the Vietnam vets. We're not going to make you wait decades. We're going to get you care and benefits today. And so please, the vets out there, and by the way, inside the PACT Act, there's also benefits for Vietnam vets. There's benefits, as I just said, for vets who did not deploy overseas. Please come see us. We work for you. We want to get you connected to your care and get you connected to your benefits.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you for that huge breakthrough. I mean, that is just a landmark achievement, and you've done a remarkable job implementing it around the country. And I know you continue to do it to, build public visibility and understanding and comprehension of it. Lots of times in campaigns, people's military service becomes totally politicized, and you did do this or you didn't do that or whatever. But in your work, the veteran service seems to be something that's really unifying. It's not a divisive, polarizing thing. And I just wonder if you would, tell us about what your experience has been like being the Secretary of the Veterans Affairs. And I know you've traveled all over the country talking to different communities.
Well, when President Biden called me to tell me to take the job, I said, Mr. President, I don't think I'll get confirmed because I'm not a veteran. There's me and one other secretary are the only two who have ever been non-veterans in this job. And so I've always come to this job, Mr. Raskin, with a certain amount of worry that somehow veterans and the team here at VA would not see me as part of the solution. And they've been so inviting of me and so supportive of me. I've really appreciated that. So I just want to get that out first. Secondly, while I'm not a veteran, I have spent all these years since 2001 when I was working for the Senate Majority Leader, and we, negotiated the authorization to use military force in reaction to that terrible attack on 9/11, those terrible attacks on 9/11. I've been involved in decision making, not making the decisions because I was a staff guy, but involved in decision making that veterans that led, millions of veterans overseas into combat, whether that was Iraq after that or Afghanistan initially, or any of the places, Philippines, Somalia, Niger, and West Africa, any of these places where we had millions and millions of our people deployed. The idea that I get to work on behalf of them now is an amazing thing. And I get to see veterans all over the country, as you said, and I see them in every corner of the country because veterans are this country. Our fastest growing cohort are women veterans. Women have fought in every battle, in every war we've fought as a country. But we've really only too recently come to terms with the fact that we need to care for all of our vets, including our women vets. They happen to be our fastest growing cohort. You know, every corner of the country, we have veterans involved in great things: coaches, teachers, firefighters, cops, members of Congress. And I get to see them continuing their service out of uniform. And so I consider this job just a great blessing to get to see what makes this country tick, and what so often is a big part of making this country tick are those veterans who, swore an oath to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and they can continue to strengthen this country once they take off the uniform.
Yeah.
It's an awesome thing.
Well, it sounds like you're leaving with a great spirit of hope and optimism about the country based on your experiences.
I do. I mean, you can't help but be impressed by and feel optimistic. I just came from sitting with two veterans who happen to work at VA. I spent the day with them. One's naturalized American from Salvador. He graduated from one of the Montgomery County public schools. And here he is, more than 20 years after he started his Army career. He's now fully retired. You can't help but be optimistic about this country when you see a guy like him, like David.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you one thing that about an interview I saw with you a long time ago, but it's stuck in my head. I could never dislodge the memory of it. And I wanted to see if you still feel the same way. But you were talking about your friendship with President Obama. And of course, you were his chief of staff and his loyal, enduring chief of staff for a remarkably well-run organization that was famous for no drama Obama and no corruption. I think it was the first administration in centuries where nobody had to resign in disgrace and so on. But in any event, what you said was, if I remember it correctly, the president had invited you to come do something with like a small group of friends or family, and you said, thank you, Mr. President, it means a lot to me, but despite all my feelings for you, I work for you, and you wanted to keep very much that kind of professional distance in your mind. And it just made me think about that kind of relationship being so central to so much of what goes on in Washington. But you felt that it was clear to delineate those boundaries. And I wonder whether you have gone on to become much more friends with President Obama since you are no longer working with him, whether you still feel the same way about that. And I didn't take it that there was any lack of emotion or affection, but you still felt it was important. And I've always wondered about that. And I wonder if you would just expand on it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question. I do remember it. I don't know if I remember the specific interview, but I definitely remember the concept. And, he invited me to play golf with him a couple of times. And I said, well, Mr. President, if I tell Kari, our kids were 7, 4, and 1 when I started working in the White House. And if I tell Kari after being gone all week that I'm also going to be gone on the weekend because I'm going to play golf with you, I'll come home and the locks will be changed on the door and she'll have thrown away the key. But I also said, Mr. President, I think it's also important that everybody understand that I'm your staff guy and I'm not your golf partner, your buddy. And I did feel strongly about that because I didn't want anybody to think that somehow I was going to abuse my access to the president to unduly undercut how the president thought about something. I was obviously going to make my arguments, but they'd always be in the light of day and transparently, nobody be wondering who's where and where something came from, which is too often the case in Washington. I think sometimes everybody, it's, subterfuge and stuff like that. But, I'm really proud of my friendship with President Obama. And, I still reach out to him all the time to get counsel. And that can be on something I'm worried about at work. It also could be something about, being a better husband and a better dad and being a better friend. And he's been that to me throughout my career. And I was saying to you earlier that the biggest opportunity here are the people I've gotten to work with, and in particular work for, a guy like President Obama, a guy like President Biden, to have had that opportunity and to develop those friendships. It's a huge blessing.
Well, you've been a blessing to the country, and you've worked not just for President Biden and President Obama, but for all of the American people. And those of us in Maryland have appreciated it so much, like in other parts of the country, Dennis. And I hope you feel the sense of friendship that we have for you, despite the fact that you were working for us all that time. And we have great admiration and great affection for you. And I hadn't thought about that other dimension. You were also looking for a way to get back to Kari and the kids, and it's it's tough enough work without getting into playing golf, and that's a long game. I don't even understand how all these people golf all the time. But,
well, it's been a blessing, and at the risk of contradicting you here on one thing, I just want the record to be clear. I'm a proud Minnesotan. My beautiful wife is from Chicago. I'm from Stillwater, Minnesota. And if I could convince Kari to move home there, I will. But the other people I'd have to convince are my kids, who every time I tell them we're going home, they say, "Dad, we are home. We're Marylanders. We are home." There
we go. Well, listen to the children, because they're always right. We have proudly adopted you and Kari, who's an amazing community servant and activist in her own right. And you guys are great parents. And so, look, you're our local hero, our first local hero of 2025. And I hope that our year will be filled with local heroes who bring as much to the community as you guys do. Thank you, Denis McDonough.
Thank you, Jamie Raskin. What an honor. Thank you very much.